We want to welcome everybody to Guest and Gusto. This is SCAD's virtual series of conversations and digital content with the creators and innovators remaking culture. I'm Melissa Howell, professor of illustration here at SCAD Atlanta, and today we're joined by illustrator and creature designer Terryl Whitlatch. She is a friend of mine, a mentor, and I first met Terryl when I was a student of hers at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. I was in her first visual elements of story class. She will be sharing her approach to animal and creature design for clients such as Disney, DreamWorks, and Lucasfilm. In this presentation, full of images from recent projects, Terryl will show you how your own life experiences and unique point of view can directly influence your design process and help you connect with audiences. First, a bit about our guest. Terryl's fascination with animals and drawing started early. Countless weekends were spent visiting zoos, aquariums, and museums with her artist mother and biologist father. Her formal education was in the sciences, but after studying illustration, Terryl began a career that has spanned 25 years. She has worked with major studios and effects houses as a highly sought-after creature and concept designer. Clients include Industrial Light and Magic, Lucasfilm Limited, Pixar, Walt Disney Feature Animation, PDI, Entertainment Arts, LucasArts, Chronicle Books, and various zoos and natural history museums. Terryl has acted as principal creature designer for Star Wars: The Phantom Menace and designed most of the alien creatures and characters from concept to fully realized anatomies and stylizations. Some of her significant characters include Jar Jar Binks, Sebulba, the Pod Racers, the undersea monsters of Naboo, and the Naboo swamp creatures. She also worked closely with George Lucas in the redesign of characters such as Jabba the Hutt and the Dewbacks. For Disney Feature Animation's Brother Bear, she designed Bear, Moose, and other animal characters from highly realistic anatomical studies to fully branded characters. She has contributed concept work to feature films including John Carter's of Mars, Dragonheart, Men in Black, Jumanji, and Pixar's Brave. She is also the creator and illustrator of 5 books: The Wildlife of Star Wars, a field guide, a personal favorite; The Katuran Odyssey, which I also love; Animals Real and Imagined, Science of Creature Design, Invaluable Information; and Principles of Creature Design. She has also contributed illustrations to Lucasfilm's The Jedi Path and Book of Sith. She was also most recently awarded Spectrum Fantastic Arts' prestigious Grand Master Award. Terryl will be taking questions after her presentation, so please use the chat to submit any questions you have. Now, before we begin, we have a short poll question. Tell us what you think for a chance to win a copy of Terryl's book, Principles of Creature Design, Creating Imaginary Animals, and A Science of Creature Design, Understanding Animal Anatomy. Which of Terryl's projects would you like to hear more about? Zoos and nature museums as clients, working in the wildlife of Star Wars, a field guide, creating Animals Real and Imagined, working at Disney Feature Animation. So please take your time and submit your answers. So without any further ado, I present Terryl Whitlatch.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Melissa, and everybody there at SCAD. It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited to give this presentation. Okay, so all of us, and well, at least so many of us, are finding ourselves in interesting circumstances due to the COVID-19 situation, and are trying to work our ways through that. And so I thought it was pretty apropos that I would kind of talk about the creative process and how that develops through one's life, and how that directly informs and influences one's design process, and through that, one's ability to create characters that can tell a story. And one of the things that really gets us through challenging and hard times, regardless of what that situation is maintaining a sense of humor. And I think for human beings, that is actually quite a survival skill. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to be showing examples from my own life and how that has influenced me and my career. So designing humorous animals and creating a really, it's hard to say, quirky world. All right. So here are just a couple of characters. They just exist because they're funny. These are from one of my many sketchbooks. We have a red panda with a coffee mug because coffee is important for all life to begin in the morning. And the one little sketch next to it is just a pun. It's a mermaid. What would a mermaid cow look like? And why did I do this? I'm not quite sure, except I suspect it has roots in the way I grew up. All right. So, enduring images. Populux. I was born in 1960, so I am old, old, old. However, that also makes me a child of the Mad Men era, when all that wonderful advertising design was going on, and we are really in the space age, and it was very, very cool. So when I was 1, 2, 3, 4, this sort of graphic is what I grew up with. It was everywhere and in all sorts of forms, and it's very magical and sparkly and wow. And these are the cars that were around. This is a 1962 Cadillac, the most bizarre car, but I thought was extremely beautiful when I was 3 years old. I begged my dad to buy this car, but it looks like it's about ready to take off and go to the moon. I think it's just wonderful. It's a creature of a car. So let me show you our car. There it is, 1963 Ford Galaxy, complete with Enterprise-like nacelles on the rear lights. I thought that was really great. It was a beast. It was a V8 engine. You revved it up. And we went places in that car from coast to coast because my dad, while he was, also a biologist, he was also a naval officer stationed in Alameda, California on one coast and Pensacola, Florida on the other coast. He was also born and raised in Florida. So I was born in California, but I'm half Floridian. So anyway, we would go from coast to coast in this car, from Alameda to Pensacola and back again. It was amazing. And this is what we saw on the way there. Look at those signs, look at the graphics. It's like so wonderful and magical. And you can see the Holiday Inn signs below. The images on the left and the images on the right are the way it used to be. It's great. Look at the one in the middle. Blah, that's all boring. Who cares about that? And then we would stay at roadside hotels on the way there. I mean, it was a little like neon, and we'd stop by at the Stuckey's coffee shops there. I don't even know if Stuckey still exists, but it was great. They had souvenirs that kids love. And there were like little hotels along the way that looked like teepees. And then we'd stop at service stations that looked like spiders from Mars. All of this went into my very young little brain. And I think I still live there. And okay, look at the interior design on the slide in the upper left. I mean, our house didn't look like that, but it's still kind of cool to kind of look like the Jetsons. And then graphics like that cocktail lounge with the space age stars. And then there's textile designs, look like Mondrian type furniture, all very floaty and imagination creating. And then this sort of textiles are everywhere. I don't know what it is, but like cat motifs. I mean, there's cats everywhere now, but cats were, I guess, took over the textile industry back in the early 60s. These images of mysterious cats and cats that look like vases and cats that were clocks. And I actually have one of those Kit Kat clocks in my studio. They just were everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I wanted a cat, that looked like that, a little black cat. And when I was 4 years old, my parents took me to see Fantasia. And that made a lasting impact. And shortly thereafter, they took me to see Bambi. These two movies remain to this very day my favorite Disney features, my very favorite. And they just shaped the way I looked at art, the way I approached animals, the way I approached creature designs. That made it just a lasting impact. Cats again. Okay, here's Gay Prairie with those strange, scary black kitty cats. but the wonderful creature and character design. You can see a really glamorous little white cat there at the bottom corner, and then at the right corner, a really funny pink cat, and just wonderful caricatures, just absolutely so much fun. My mother majored in art history when she was in college, and so there's all these art books around. And as a young child, even before I could read, I would just pore over these images. And these particular ones are my favorites. We have Chagall in the upper left, with that little, with the man looking tenderly, even though he has a green face, has this little colt, this little horse. And then one of the most beautiful equine pieces of art I've ever seen by Caravaggio, where we have St. Paul who's fallen from the horse because he's just had his vision of Christ, and the horse being led carefully over him. So and this is amazing because in Renaissance art, while people are done very well, horses usually aren't, which is strange because horses were everywhere back then. But it turns out that the artists were looking at Roman sculptures of horses rather than looking at the real thing, except for Caravaggio. We have Dear Chirico on the upper right, and those mysterious dream-like feelings. And I had dreams like that, so I really related to that picture. And then we have Rousseau, on the bottom left, and that's just dreamy and wonderful. And then right next door, there we go with this carnival, circus, which is scary and wonderful at the same time. And I always wanted to be able to go outside that window and see what the outside was like, outside that crazy room. And then I discovered, Luca and Klimt, and the design work there, the realism combined with graphic design and decorative art is just amazing. It just kind of blew my mind as to, you didn't have to have one or the other, you could have both in between, and just amazing stuff. And then my favorite wildlife artists, and Jay Materness, one of the best paleo illustrators ever, and that's in the upper left. We have Bob Kuhn with those beautiful impala. We have William D. Barry with those lovely little wolf cubs, Paul Bransom with the deer, Don Eccleberry with the birds. These artists were very formative in how I approached drawing animals. They just seemed to be able to live the animal, to capture the animal, to respect the animal on its own terms and not to make anything else of it. So while we have, we can have Disney-esque humor on one hand, yet even with Disney, they respect the animal on its own terms. And I think that's one of the things that made Bambi work and what made Brother Bear work in so many of those types of productions. They weren't merely trying to be caricatures of people, but they did respect actual elements that the animals brought to the table as well. This is what I watched growing up on television. Mr. Ed, Carol Burnett show, The Flintstones, which was actually aired on prime time because it was meant for adults rather than children, believe it or not. I loved Star Trek, The Munsters, The Addams Family. I was fortunate that my mother let me watch Dark Shadows from the age of 6, even though it was supposed to be scary, but I absolutely loved all that scary stuff. And in fact, later on, just maybe a couple of years ago, I gave myself a little exercise because I was doing a lot of caricatures of animals, people as animals. And so I thought, well, let's take Dark Shadows is this scary Gothic drama from the 1960s, which is still very, very popular to this day. And what if they were animals? What would that look like? So there we go. That's the sketch. One of them anyway, with Barnabas Collie instead of Barnabas Collins. So what would a vampire dog look like? And yet he had to be very elegant because the actor, Jonathan Frid, who portrayed his character, was very elegant and Byron-esque. And so it couldn't be a funny looking dog. It had to be very elegant. And then we have Angelique, who was a very evil, but very absolutely adorable witch with her little voodoo animals. And anyway, this was just very fun to do because in that show, they did all kinds of terrible things as you can imagine, including bricking up people and walls. And so that was fun. And that's just an example of how the past can inform the present in your design processes. There's Barnabas Colley. All right, so also growing up, you know, there was where we got our gas at the mobile station. I was fascinated by that Pegasus. And yes, I finally did get that little black cat when I was in kindergarten. There's Twinkle the cat. There's my grandfather's Palomino Tennessee Walker, Halloween decorations. I love horses to this day. I was 3 years old when I was first put on the back of a horse, and I've not stopped since then. So dressage and riding is a big part of my life. Okay, so those trips I mentioned, from Alameda to Florida, we always inevitably ended up at Panama City Beach. And because it looks like this, and I like that, the beautiful sugar sands. And what was even just as good, in the evenings, we would go to the play putt-putt course. That would be Goofy Golf. And Goofy Golf was really fun because it was so tacky. But as a kid, it was so fun. You could see these great humor in these statues on the little golf course, including mermaid eating octopuses and dinosaurs and cross-eyed sphinxes and whatever else. It was so fun. And here's some artwork that was directly inspired. This was for an actual job. Here's a putt-putt tournament that takes place on another planet, a very absurd world, but it was directly inspired by those early experiences in my childhood. And in the evenings, we would then also go to the boardwalk there, the best boardwalk ever, even better than Disney World, at least in my opinion. We had Jungle Land with this, it was like a tiki club for kids with this volcano, and we had the most scariest haunted castle ride, and oh, it was great. I just loved that. And Ponce de Leon was the city that my dad was born and raised in the Panhandle, and there's lots of snapping turtles and alligators and swamps, and also nearby is the Weeki Wachee mermaid attraction where Mr. Peabody and the mermaid were filmed, and parts of the Incredible Mr. Limpet and all that good magical stuff. So my childhood was very magical. We went back to the West Coast near Alameda, and there was the Oakland Zoo, the California Academy of Sciences, all that wonderful sciencey thing. And every other weekend when my dad wasn't at the naval base, he would take us to those places. And so animals and science and merry-go-rounds, that also went to the mix. These were books, some of my favorite books when I was a little girl. You know, Beatrix Potter, she was absolute genius when it came to portraying animals and storytelling. L. Leslie Brown with his Johnny Crow's Garden and nursery rhyme series. And again, Bob Kuhn, who I mentioned before, Big Book of Wild Animals was where I first encountered him. And then my mother later gave me, for my birthday, the animal art of Bob Kuhn. I think I was about 12 years old. And I was like, that's what I want to do. Again, more illustrations that inspired me. I did my own version of the Scroobius Pip that's on the right. I drew those at the San Francisco airport a couple years ago, but those other illustrations by Hilary Knight, they really inspired me, especially in terms of doing illustrations for the Caturan Odyssey. On the right, I did some artwork about 3 years ago for the CTN Creative Talent Network Conference. It was the 150th anniversary of the publishing of Alice in Wonderland, and so I did a poster of that. But we can see on the right some of the illustrations by Tennille. He was also very instrumental as far as what influenced me. And then of course, Maurice Sendak at the top with Where the Wild Things Are. Dr. Seuss, amazing artist. I just loved him. I grew up with him. Just incredible art. Absolutely brilliant illustrator and creature designer. I did my own take on one of his ideas. You can see there, Big R was little Rosie Robin Ross. I did my own version there a couple of years ago, except instead of Rosie Robin Ross, I did Rosie Rah Rah on their red rhinoceros instead. Again, Tiki, the whole Tiki world is just crazy and fun. It started when I was taken to the Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland when I was little. And then as an adult, I like to go to tiki lounges and tiki bars. As you can see, it's like adult Disneyland. Very magical and fun and exciting and silly. And of course, I love Shag's artwork. He is just incredibly fun. He's taking that late night, about 1959 through 1965 jet set lifestyle and putting it into great art. It's just so much fun. So let's see. Here we go. So a couple little sketches. I did like a little tiki minotaur and I did the little tiki wildebeest. They're very happy animals because they've had plenty of blue Hawaiis inside them, I guess. This is what I was listening to as a young person when I was, in high school in my early 20s. Talking Heads, the B-52s, and Blondie. And I think you're starting to see a pattern here to what's inspirational. And of course, I live in the Pacific Northwest, which is crazy. This general area is where like the X-Files were filmed and all kinds of craziness goes on. We love coffee. Coffee is like a national religion up here. And we've got Tim Hortons, we've got any number of independent coffee shops, Dutch Brothers, and then killer donuts, voodoo donuts. They're so deadly that they serve it to you in their own little coffin. And it's also one of the big wine growing regions for the US, the Willamette Valley of Oregon. And again, as I mentioned, I live in a very strange and wonderful place. We have tree octopuses. You go outside one morning and your car looks like, it grew legs. Bigfoot purportedly lives around here, and we, have all kinds of crazy things. Portland has its own volcano. It's extinct, but it's there in the middle of the city. It's Mount Tabor, and we have real live living volcanoes around here too. There is both Mount Hood and Mount Rainier. One overlooks, of course, Seattle. The other one overlooks Portland. The cities that wait to die, but that's okay. We're still happy. All right, so all of that is background. I want to give you all that background because it really informed a recent project that I did for a Korea company called Imagination International. And it was for a project called Cascadia. And these are some of the illustrations that were informed by it. It takes place in a mythical Pacific Northwest where there aren't any people, but there's plenty of animals, and all these animals do lots of silly and dumb human things. And they do things that maybe we might not be exactly politically correct for people to talk about, but if you're an animal, it's fine. You can do whatever you want. So let's get started here. This is a rough drawing of a logo that is designed by cats. Two of the main characters in Cascadia are a couple of cats. They are graphic designers. They work for an advertising agency in a Eugene-like city, which isn't Eugene, but it's kind of itself, but it's like Eugene, Oregon, which is kind of crazy. And they were asked to design for their company a logo, easy to read, whether it's very small, really big, etc. But come on, how would a cats design a logo? Well, probably starring themselves. That's the working drawing for that logo. And there we have it. So Twinkle and Armand. Armand is the little orange cat and Twinkle is the little black cat. They decided that they would also include themselves in the logo. They would include everything they like to do in the logo, and also, some artistic tools into the logo and little bits and pieces of their local tiki lounge that they like to frequent in the logo. And the name of the tiki lounge that they like to go to is called the Forbidden Volcano. And you can also see that coffee is very important to their work ethic. And this is how cats design a very streamlined logo. All right. This is another character. His name is Dagger. Dagger is a unicorn, as you can see. Dagger is a very nice unicorn. He is looking for a female unicorn to get married to. He hasn't been successful so far. He's got a few, let's say, awkward social challenges. One of them being is that unlike most unicorns who thrive on a diet of candy and daffodils, Dagger is carnivorous. He was just born that way. His parents still love him, but when Mount St. Helens blew up, it kind of disturbed the Oregon, well, the Cascadian vortexes, and so now he gets by eating sushi in secret. He tries to eat candy, but doesn't really agree with him. And we based his character, as you can see, on Rick Moranis, and that's what who I had in mind when I designed poor Dagger here. And you can see the rough drawing up there in the upper left. So, you're thinking of injecting personality and humor. You think of what was funny and quirky in your own growing up and formative years, and as an adult as well. And you pour all that into your design process when you're developing characters, especially for humorous productions. This is Laverne. Laverne is a lilac llama, and she's sort of a celebrity in the world of Cascadia. She just, it happens to be, purplish. And the little lemur there, that's Lemuel. He's her agent. And I based her on Katharine Hepburn, her personality, kind of this, hello, my name's Laverne and I'm famous. Yes. So, that's sort of the inspiration for her. And often when you're creating humorous characters, it's handy to have a personality in mind as you go along. Even in the animation business, even if they're not going to actually hire a particular celebrity to voice the character, they often have that celebrity or a couple of other ones like him or her in mind when they're designing funny characters. So we, III, that is Imagination International Incorporated, as a subset of this project, went ahead and published some of the characters in their own little books. And some of the characters in this drama of Cascadia are the muses or of very famous artists. Are they actually real? Are they not? But they usually appear to the main characters in a sort of like fever dreams if they've had one too many at the local, Forbidden Island Tiki Lounge. So we're not quite sure if they're real or figments of their imaginations, but here they are. So we have, lots of fun here. Taking, this is Ella Greco. And so we were just shameless about desecrating fine art. So this is Ella Greco, and you can see the type of artworks that he produces. He lives on a steady diet of beer nuts and who knows what else, probably zombies, I guess. And you can see that his artwork often involves the creation of rather elongated pink elephants. And here is Delacroix. Delacroix is somewhat of a mid 19th century steampunk Victorian person. And he has invented a good way of opening champagne bottles. He also, as you can see, loves exotica, especially if they involve dancing, exotic dancing girls, etc. And so this is Eugène Delacroix. And this is Andy Narwhal. Andy Narwhal invented a really cool cocktail called the Nartini, and you can see he patented it. He throws really great parties. And this is obviously a caricature of Andy Warhol. We did some flash animation with his character, and these are some of the model sheets for the consonants and the vowels. And that was a lot of fun to do. And of course, with any kind of creature design, character design, understanding real life anatomy is so important. And I do an awful lot of this sort of thing. I teach creature anatomy for schoolism online, and everything we draw is really based in reality, regardless of how extreme our stylizations ultimately turn out to be. Chuck Jones famously said that if you want to draw a funny looking horse, it sure helps to be able to draw a real one. And that is also so true. So knowing real life animal anatomy helps you when you're designing animal characters, such as Claude Monet, actually Claude Poney, excuse me, Claude Poney. So those are my roughs. You can see my very rough sketch thumbnail in the upper left, and then how I developed and refined it. This is all part of the design process. And there is Claude Poney in one of his very famous haystack paintings with happy little, very, very happy little chickens and such. Here are some more roughs. So many times we see the artwork of artists on Facebook and Instagram and wherever, full flung in all their finished, refined glory. You think, oh my goodness, how did they do that? How come I'm not so great as that, you know? Oh my goodness. Well, that's edited, and they're only showing their very best work. They're not showing all the crummy drawings and crummy tries before they posted their work. And I just wanted to show you some of my little squiggly things down here as I was working out problems for this particular project. And you can see I was experimenting with different poses, and you can see all my little squiggly lines and things like that. And again, more review of animal anatomy. This comes in so handy when it comes to stylization. Once you have this sort of thing as your anchor, the world is your oyster, I guarantee it. That enables you to create Cheetah Kalo. And I put a little bit of Greta Garbo into her personality as well. And you can see there's some little thumbnails I did, to the left, and then I had fun with Cheetah Kalo. And here's a leopard. Knowing leopard anatomy comes in really handy when you're doing Leopardo. So there's Leopardo, and there's one of his most famous paintings, the Pony Lisa. And you can see he is pretty happy. He's always got his, his bottles and glass of Chianti nearby to keep him inspired. These are all very happy animals. And there's another illustration of Leopardo, both the rough and the more finished drawing. And of course we have Fragonard. There is Fragonard and his very famous painting, The Swing, complete with, garden snails and such. And you can see the reference of the little frog I use, which is a white tree frog, and they're just so fat and adorable. And as I was doing this illustration in referring to the Fatnard's famous painting, The Swing, it struck me that the legs on the woman in the swing are rather strange. She must have extremely long thighs to get to where her knees are, as you can see under her skirt. And I thought, how did I miss that before when I've seen that painting? Anyway, so that was something I thought, oh, that's interesting. And there is another sketch of Fragonard. And then you sketch at zoos and museums and such to see the animals in real time and how they behave and the little funny things they do. And I was referring to my own sketches here when I did this piece here for Punny Animals, and that's Otticelli and his famous painting, The Birth of Venus. You can see the original one to the side, and I actually saw that painting in Florence, Italy. It's an amazing painting. It's really, really huge and so glowing, and to see it face to face. And so I thought about that painting when I was making fun of it in this particular drawing here. And you can see all those references I referred to earlier, things that inspired me, continue to do so. There's, blowfish there that you can often see in tiki lounges. There's volcanoes, there's tiki mugs, there's funny and silly animals. And here's Picasso, of course, with his famous paintings there, including the old guitar fish there, and my roughs, and it's just so fun. It's just so fun, and I wanted to make him, at least make him a handsome type of member of the Sweet A family. Let's just say he was known somewhat for his misogynistic and not being a nice person characteristics, but you don't want to be too mean to anybody. So I made him the most handsome type of wild boar that I could. And that's, again, for the flash animation, some of the model sheets for the consonants and the vowels. Oh, there's the consonants there. And then some gestures. This is Salvador Kali. He's got the longest mustachios of any canine known to man, I guess. And then his famous painting of the drippy cats, which basically is what cats do anyway. So there's my references and rough sketches on the left, and my finished on the right. Van Gogh, of course, he's known for eating his masterpieces, as you can see here. And it's just really fun to revisit art history and to play around, to do caricatures of people as animals. And here's Nuka. This is Nuka, Alphonse Nuka. And again, you can see how I start out. There's that little very, very rough thumbnail on the upper left. And then I laid a more refined drawing over one of Nuka's existing graphics and did my own spin on it. You can see that there's blowfish in the circles instead of peacock feathers, and just kind of try to make it as pretty much as crazy and silly as I could. This took me a while to do, needless to say. The wildebeest didn't take long at all, but all the decorative elements, that was like over and over again. And here's Miko Antelope. This is Miko Antelope. Very famous for painting large football size ceiling extravaganzas. And there he is painting away. And you can see my inspirations there on the, towards the left. And then we have Hukase, and The Great Wipeout. I really enjoyed doing this one a lot. I love barn owls. Barn owls are just so cute, and I think most people like owls, and so he was a pleasure to do. And you can see the little dragon, a little raccoon dog surfing in his very, very most famous print ever. And there's some more characters. If there's time, I can go through. There's maybe about 6 more images here. And these are some that are in process right now. And so we did the artists, and there's also writers. And they're not all finished yet, but I was able to get permission to show them in process. All right, so we have Mules Verne. Mules Verne is definitely a friend of Eugène Delacroix. They both are kind of a little bit of a steampunk characters, and they invent elaborate devices in order to make, in Delacroix's case, a simple cup of espresso, and in his case, the Moscow Mule. And so even though that's not a relatively simple drink to make by hand, why not make something that's really elaborate to show off your inventive skills? So Mules Verne with the famous Moscow Mule. And then we have Jane Ostrich, yes, which is a pun, of course, Jane Austen. And we have Mark Crane, of course. And we've got a lot of cats in the background on a paddle boat that has volcano-like stacks. And these are part of more of the Cascadian cat art graphics company in the background having fun. So you can see I haven't done all the backgrounds yet, but it's fun. And we have Ernest Hemingway, and he's talking about his great fish story to a lot of little eager croc scouts there, and they're believing everything he says, of course. Ernest Hemingway. And the crocodiles, of course, come from, Ponce de Leon, Florida, where they have well, these are actually crocodiles, these are baby alligators. There's no crocodiles, there's just alligators. And here we've got C.S. Shrewish and his good friend Molken. Those are middle earthworms there. And they like to share quite a few tankards together, and maybe that helps inform why they see these middle earthworms. And of course we have The Great Gatsby, of course, here. And F. Scott Fitzgerald. And to conclude, we have the Brontosaurus sisters. We know the Bronte sisters. This is the Brontosaurus sisters. And they're just writing their novels of Gothic angst while they're waiting for the next meteor to strike, I suppose. So basically, this is how, a good example, at least how my past experiences, my growing up years, and things up to this day influence my development of characters in a humorous context. And of course, all this has to do also with the input of the art director, but even so, you bring to the table things that are funny and humorous to you, and if they're funny and humorous to you, most likely they are with many, many, many other people. So that's my little presentation, and I can always go back to other slides in this presentation should anybody want to have a closer look. So there we go, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Terryl. This has been a very welcome respite from all the insanity of the world and the doldrums of shelter in place. So thank you so much for sharing your whimsical creatures with us. We do have some questions from our audience here. I actually want to start with one of my own I've always wanted to know because I know you studied zoology and science, and I'm wondering why you decided to go with illustration instead of pursuing a science career.
Well, I had almost completed a degree in vertebrate zoology, but this is back when college wasn't quite as expensive as it is now. And I thought, I don't think I want to end up studying lions in Africa for the rest of my life, because I don't think I want to get eaten by one. I would much rather draw and paint them. And my goal actually was, one of the reasons for the science was I was intending on being a scientific illustrator and doing work for, say, Scientific American, Smithsonian, National Geographic, clients like those. And I have had clients like those, and paleo illustration, reconstruction makes up a big part of my income stream. However, I didn't want to restrict myself to that. And so I thought, well, I still have some college money. I'm going to just switch gears and take some courses at a couple of local art schools. I divided my time between the College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland and the Academy of Art College. It wasn't accredited back then. I think there was only like 2 buildings back then in the early 80s. And while I was there, all my credits transferred over, so I didn't have far to go before graduating from those 2 schools. And there was a student show that was required for graduation, and so I had some artwork there, and they're all animals, just all real animals. And some art directors from Lucasfilm saw those artworks, and they hired me out of school, and that's what happened. And that was the start of my career in the entertainment industry. Just like that, they said, and I didn't have illustrations of monsters or space creatures. They were just real animals. And they said, but it showed I knew the anatomy. And they told me, because you understand animal anatomy, that's what we're looking for. If you can draw real animals, then creature design is a piece of cake. And that's why they hired me. And that's what happened. It's like I didn't have a dream of working at Disney or Lucasfilm or Universal. I was going to design and do artwork for scientists and stuff like that, people like those. But who knows? I was just in that particular right time at the right place, and there we go.
Wow, our career paths can take any trajectory. It's incredible how we get to where we are. And we have Alexis wants you to elaborate a little more on your work as a scientific illustrator and what it was like working with those clients, just to get an idea.
Well, working with scientists, you're dealing with facts that you can't change. For example, if you're doing a reconstruction of, in fact, I've done some reconstructions recently of some cutting edge discoveries of pterodactyls. You can't change the scientific evidence. You have a skull or you have a bone fragment. That is the way it is. What your job is then to be able to reconstruct the animal according to the location of muscle scars on the bones. And in most cases, you only have partial skeletons at best. It's very rare to discover an entire skeleton. You're using inference. So you're going back and forth between the animal's closest living relatives and what is actually there. And you're working hand in hand with the scientists. So they give you photographs or whatever it is of what they've discovered, the bones and such, and you're in conference with them. You do a reconstruction, you send it to them, they say, I think so, or no, this needs to be changed. In a way, it's not dissimilar from working with an art director for a feature film or a TV show. You're doing a try, you're handing over your try to them, they say, oh yeah, this looks good. No, you need to change this sort of thing. It's just that the constraints in dealing with biological entities is more determined. In other words, I just can't put anything I want on the animal. Like, I'm going to put some great big horns or something on this animal if there isn't any evidence for that. You're taking direct inspiration from the real world. And so your art director is basically a scientist. And the same thing is like for, if you're doing stuff for a zoo or a museum of real animals, you're being pretty literal, because unless you're doing, say, a cartoon version of a tiger for, say, the children's zoo or something like that, you're basically trying to inform and educate the viewer as to what does a tiger look like, what does the skull of a tiger look like, that sort of thing. So your goal is to educate and put forward research to share with other scientists and the public who is interested in science. So I would say that that would be the similarities and differences between those two aspects.
Okay. And in that same area of questioning, we have somebody, Marin, I believe, who's wondering where you studied vertebrate zoology.
I studied vertebrate zoology at Sonoma State University in California.
Oh, okay. And we have a few anatomy questions here. Obviously. How much study of real animals is done for creating your imagined creatures? And do you prefer to start with the imagined creatures' outer appearance and then incorporate comparative analysis of real animals for creating the anatomy? Basically, what's your process when you're designing a creature anatomically?
Okay, that's a very good question. For an imaginary creature, say an imaginary creature that is like for Star Wars or whatever it is, I usually start from the surface. I have an idea in mind, I'll draw the animal, the surface animal. Now, that being said, I have enough knowledge of real animals and their anatomy to be able to do that. If I am drawing, if I'm reconstructing an animal like a dinosaur, then I take the opposite approach. I take the skeleton and then I hang the muscles on it. Now, if I'm designing, again, an imaginary creature, I start out with the surface, okay, and then let's say the art director says, okay, I like this creature. Now you need to get it ready to send to production. In this case, maybe it's Industrial Light and Magic, so they can model it, rig it, etc. What I have to do then is create the skeleton of that creature based on my surface silhouette, and then I hang the muscles on that last. And then the skeletal diagram and the muscular diagram and the surface, of course, are sent over to production for them to be able to model the character. They used those skeletons and muscles to design the rigging for the character so it can be animated, and often will with overlay or enfold the vectored skeleton, that's the master skeleton, with the slave skeleton, that's the realistic skeleton, and then layer those, layer the texture over it for the surface. It's very complicated in creating this very elaborate digital marionette, in effect. So imaginary creatures from the surface, then the skeleton, then the muscles. If you're doing a reconstruction of a dinosaur, it's the skeleton, hang the muscles on, and then the surface.
We also have several questions about what we can do to improve. So if we want to be a creature designer like you, what are some recommendations on animal anatomy books that you found helpful? How much work you put into everything, how much practice you do. One of our questions involves, can anyone be an artist if you work hard enough? I personally believe you can. Yes, you have to have that drive. But what sort of inspiration and information can you give our aspiring creature designers and animal illustrators for recommendations and reference?
I would say to be an effective creature designer and be aware that in the industry, creature design includes real animals as well as imaginary animals. And if you think about it, most creature design is actually the portrayal of real animals. Most Disney features deal with real animals, whether they're stylized or whatever. You can count on the fingers of one hand how many Star Wars or Avatar films or even television series are created with imaginary creatures. Not that many, but there's a whole lot that have actual real animals. So just so that everybody's aware. The most important thing to be an effective creature designer is you really absolutely need to have a love and empathy for real animals. That makes all the difference. If you have a love and empathy for real animals and you care about them, that will translate in not only how you portray actual animals, but how you portray and create imaginary animals that will flow through. If you respect how real animals are in their natural state, you can convey that. It will trickle down into your imaginary creatures. And it's also that passion for those very real animals that share a planet that will energize you and keep you going as you grind through the process of practice and practice at your craft. So I would say it's drawing. What makes a horse different from a cow? Why are the differences in their legs? What makes an animal special? What is in their behaviors? So that's one thing that you need to have. You need to love to go to the zoo. You need to love to just watch animals and do what they do. Okay, so resources. This is always a great question. The resources I had as far as books and stuff goes, they're kind of far and few between, unfortunately. There's the classic by Dover, which is the Atlas of Animal Anatomy for Artists by Ellenberger, Dietrich, and Baum. Happily, that is always constantly published. There's another one they published by Charles R. Knight, and I think it's called Animal Drawing and Painting. That's a good one. There's Goldfinger's book. I think it's probably about 15 or 10 years old by now. That's a really good book. Now, all these deal primarily with mammalian anatomy. The Knight book gets a little bit into some bird, into some fish and reptile anatomy, but not too much. And that's hard to find good resources on reptilian and bird anatomy. For bird anatomy, you can find ornithology manuals. You can go on to Amazon, look up ornithology manuals, and those are good sources. The same thing for amphibian, reptile, fish. Try to find manuals for comparative vertebrate anatomy courses like you learn in university, because those aren't easy to, those type of references aren't easy to find. Gregory Paul, who is a paleo illustrator best known for his dinosaur work, has in the last couple of years a new title called, I think, The Princeton Field Guide to the Dinosaurs, and he's got some nice musculature and skeletal diagrams of dinosaurs. But yeah, it's hard to find reptilian fish references outside of the science textbooks. What I've done in my books, Science and Creature Design, etc., is a distillation of everything I learned in my zoology degree and my esoteric sources. So I try to make that available to the public in my books. As far as invertebrate anatomy goes, again, textbooks on entomology, those would be sources of finding diagrams to help you out there. So those are my best sources for those sorts of things. I believe that the Noman School of Special Effects in LA has some DVDs on modeling insects. So those might be helpful. Other than that, going to watching animals, sketching them in the zoos or museums, that will really inform you as to the specialness of them. And another good thing you can do, and I know it's harder right now because of the COVID situation, but even going to your local Petco, that's a wealth of animals to draw. There's fish, there's small mammals, there's birds, and you can see them up close and personal, and you can sketch them there. And on the way out, buy a really nice magazine. Those magazines on animals are full of nice photo references. So that's a good place to go. I know, again, it's harder with the whole COVID situation, but that's my best answer.
Thank you. And one more question before we get the poll results. This has come a couple times. You have such an emphasis on the importance of animal anatomy, and you inject the perfect amount of anthropomorphism to bring these characters to life. Can you speak a bit about your process to strike this balance between reality and fantasy?
Okay, I guess it's sort of like cooking or baking. When you bake a cake, you have to put a certain amount of sugar, a certain amount of salt, and a little bit too much of one or the other creates a disaster. Either something that's a sweet, gooey mess, or one that's like, what am I eating, So with the artworks I've shown you in this presentation, I am taking pretty much an actual animal and just tweaking it just a little bit. Obviously, these dinosaurs in the last slide are sitting at tables and using human tools and stuff, so that kind of helps the process along because they're doing human things. Anatomically, they're pretty spot on as far as how a dinosaur is built, but in the faces and the gesture, they're doing human-y type things. There's just maybe a little lift of an eyebrow. There's maybe a little bit of a quirk at the corner of a mouth, and that can be just enough to push you over into that slight edge that you want. And again, it depends on the production. If I am designing, say, designing for Pixar versus, say, the remake of the Lion King for Disney, obviously that's a big gap there. One is so uber realistic, and then the other one is like The Incredibles is like, hey, it's so stretchy and funny and exaggerated. But in both productions, there is a general respect for an animal, even if you are exaggerating it a lot. There's that fundamental anatomy there, even though it may not be quite as that apparent. So I would say that depending upon the production, you shift a little bit of that sugar versus salt. How much can I exaggerate the animal without it falling apart? I think that's the thing. If it starts to fall apart, you don't recognize it as the animal. That's just too much anthropomorphism. And a good example that is, I try to discourage students from doing this, but unless the art director intentionally asks for it, to draw a animal character that's basically a human being with an animal head and an animal tail is sort of creepy, but I see it a lot. And so I try to discourage students from doing that. In fact, most art directors say, don't put those types of things in your portfolios. Please don't include furries in your portfolio. So that's a good example of what not to do. Do not do that. Do not do that. If you look at a character like Bugs Bunny, he is an extremely exaggerated rabbit, and he is not, even though he's wearing gloves and such, in his proportions, he is definitely pretty bizarre, and he does not qualify as a furry by any count, and neither does Mickey Mouse. I think we know the difference. Though they are their own selves, they're highly exaggerated animals, and they're still able to, at the very, very edge of this, they're still able to maintain that essential fundamental ability as an animal. That's about as extreme as you can go before the animal starts to fall apart, and still, maintain that.
All right, and we have the poll results. Oh, here we go. So people would like to hear a little bit more about the creating animals real and imagined.
Okay, so that was that was what my third book, and basically that one came out of lectures that I gave at the Academy of Art University. As you know, Melissa, I was teaching pretty much, I think we were 6-hour classes, if I recall. And so after my lecture, I would give a demo for the rest of the class, and I'd have the class draw along. I brought all these references of animals. We didn't have as many online references as we do now, so I was constantly lugging in books and things from my own library and photo references and things. But I would draw the particular animal groups that we were focusing on per class. For example, if it was learning how to draw felines, I would draw a feline, and basically, as I was drawing, saying, here's the shoulder blade, here's the how the muscles work in the legs, and I would use that. I would draw most of the entire class and then I'd check on what the other students were doing and such. And so I saved all of those drawing demos, and a big bulk of that book are those published drawing demos. Are they perfect drawings? No, I mean, there's lots of things I think, gee, what was I thinking of that day? That was not a very good drawing, but they're drawings I did in class, and you can see all the notes and things I was writing there for the class. And then I included some other artwork that I was working on during that particular time period. I had some clients going on. I was always, even though I was teaching full time at the time, I still had a client base that I was keeping alive. And so that was what that book was. And again, it's not necessarily what I consider my best work, but it was, I thought, informative. It was helpful to my students, and so I thought, well, let's just publish it. And Design Studio Press was interested, and that opened the door to another series of books. And I'm working on my fourth one for them right now. I'm almost done with the illustrations, and that one's going to be called Flying Monsters, and it's actually written by a foremost paleontologist. So I'm really eager to get that out the door. But that's how Animals Real and Imagined came down. It was from my teaching experiences at the Academy of Art University.
All right, thank you so much. And we have like one more quick question. People are wondering if your punny animals will be featured in a book, because they absolutely adore them.
Well, it actually is. And let's see. You would need to contact Imagination International Incorporated. I'm not sure if it's still on Amazon or not. I would need to give you that information, the contact information, and you could pass it on and see if that book is still available. Okay. I know with the COVID situation, that particular client has had their own challenges, and they're still in existence, of course, happily, and they may still have some more in their warehouse, and that would be cool.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, Terryl, so much for taking the time and sharing your world and your experience with us. It has been an absolute pleasure. And
it really is.
It
Oh,
was
thank you.
wonderful. And we'll see everyone next time on Guest and Gusto. Thanks, everybody.
I must say, I have to say that I really like your aesthetic.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I share a
Terryl.
lot, and I share a lot of interests with you too, like Alice in Wonderland and Dr. Seuss.
Those are fabulous artists, that's for sure.
Indeed. Anyways, see ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Terryl.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.